faithfully delivering value, interpreting great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally Talks Books. Today we're interpreting the novel The Catcher in the Rye. Its author, J.D. Salinger, was born into a wealthy Jewish family in New York. During his student days, he aimed to write a novel that everyone would read. At age 23, when the U.S. joined World War II, Salinger enlisted in the Army. After the war, he wrote several war-themed novels like Raise High the Roof Beam, Carpenters, and others. But his greatest work is still The Catcher in the Rye, a must-read in 20th century American literature. Published in 1951, it caused a huge stir right away, sparking two very different reactions. On one hand, American teens went crazy for it, reprinted 5 times in just half a month, selling 1 million copies yearly since, and over 65 million total. Its literary merit is recognized, with nearly 300 universities like Yale making it required reading. On the other hand, it's faced constant criticism and bans since day one. How bad was it? The U.S. Embassy once tried to gift it, but customs seized it. 1981 data shows The Catcher in the Rye was both the most borrowed and most banned book in schools. Salinger totally ignored all that outside noise. He bought a country house, fenced it with electricity, and cut off from the world. A writer was about to publish his biography when Salinger found it quoted his unpublished letters, so he sued the writer, killing the publication plan. Thus, no one dared write his bio again while he lived. The criticism and his seclusion made the work more mysterious and appealing. More folks want to read it, and it's now translated into almost every language. Why is it banned so much yet resonates worldwide? Next, let's chat about what story The Catcher in the Rye actually tells. The protagonist is Holden, a 16-year-old junior high student, tall and thin, from a rich family, but hates studying. He's been kicked out of several schools, always for bad grades or causing trouble. This time, he ended up at a prestigious prep school called Pensy Prep, but he still couldn't settle down there. He failed 4 out of 5 final exams, so the headmaster told him, "Don't come back after Christmas break." Oh, there were still a few days left before Christmas break, but Holden couldn't stand it anymore. He felt bored everywhere and thought everyone was phony. So he decided to leave early, wander around New York City for a couple of days before heading home. Yeah, just like you'd think, Holden is a pretty rebellious kid, smoke always in hand, curse words flying. But sometimes he unwittingly shows a bit of confusion and vulnerability. There's a part in the book where Holden reflects on his age, and it's really interesting. He jokes about having gray hair already, then says he's 17, 6 foot 2.5 inches, about 189, so he looks like an adult. But sometimes he acts really immature, like he's only 12. 12 to 18 is a tricky stage. In personality psychology, this period is called the psychosocial moratorium. What is a psychosocial moratorium? Technically, once you're past 12, you're not a child anymore. You should ditch the kid rules and adopt adult ways and social logic. But changing overnight isn't possible. It takes a process. During this process, teenagers face an identity crisis. What does that mean? It means that adjusting your values and social roles to align with adult society's rules is pretty tough. Those who adjust well transition smoothly into adulthood. Those who don't might always feel out of sync with society, unable to fit in well, and could end up living a life of cynicism and isolation. Holden, the novel's protagonist, is going through this. He refuses to change himself because he despises the hypocrisy of adult society and believes only the world of children is pure and good. So what he fears most is that as kids grow up, they become just as phony as adults. That's why, in Holden's world, childhood friends, his dead brother and his little sister who hasn't grown up yet, are the most beautiful and cherished things. Holden's childhood friend was named Jane Gallagher. Back then, they were really close, and often played chess together. Jane always kept her king in the back row. Years passed, but Holden always remembered that little habit. When his high school roommate dated Jane, Holden kept asking him to find out, does she still keep the king in the back row? Because to Holden, that tiny detail symbolized their shared childhood. He wanted to confirm if the Jane now was still the same little friend he remembered. But actually, they'd already drifted apart. He didn't even know what school Jane attended now. Neither did Jane. Similarly, when waiting for Holden's roommate next door, even though bored, she didn't think to greet Holden. Later during his New York wanderings, Holden often thought about calling Jane, but always found reasons not to. They were no longer close friends. Only Holden refused to admit it. His brother Allie, like Jane, was often mentioned but never appeared. Allie was 2 years younger than Holden with bright red hair. He was kind, smart, and very likable. He had a baseball glove covered in green ink poems, so when no one pitched, Allie could read poetry to pass time. Sadly, Allie died of leukemia at 10. When Holden heard, he smashed car windows, barehanded until his hands bled. Later, when lonely, Holden would talk to Allie in his mind, even whispering, Allie, keep me from getting lost, crossing streets. Allie lived on in Holden's heart like this. When his roommate asked him to write an essay, just describe anything, Holden immediately thought of Allie's baseball glove, showing how deep his longing was. While writing, Holden wore his red hunting hat, one of his signature accessories. The red matched his brother Allie and sister Phoebe's hair color. That hunting hat was like a guardian angel when he felt lonely. In uncomfortable situations, he'd instinctively put it on, afraid of change. He loved museums because time stands still there. He says even if you went 100,000 times, that Eskimo would still have just caught 2 fish. Those birds would still be flying south. The deer would still be drinking by the water hole. Their legs still so beautiful, still slender and fine. These words are poetic and moving, but how can the world stay unchanged? Even museum exhibits change. When Holden discovered this, he felt even more sad and anguished. Holden realized he was growing up but didn't know where to find his new place. He often mentioned the ducks in Central Park's lagoon. They're fine there normally, but when the lake freezes in winter, where do they go? Does someone take them to the zoo, or do they fly away themselves? He asked his history teacher, asked taxi drivers, but never got serious answers. His obsession with the winter ducks came because Holden felt he too was in life's winter, not knowing how to escape the cold or what face to show life's changes. He did seek help from others. He went to his history teacher, a former senior, and his respected English teacher. They all spoke at length, but he couldn't grasp their points, never fully lowering his guard. When meeting the history teacher, Holden had just learned of his expulsion and felt somewhat wronged and resistant. At first, the teacher made small talk, and Holden responded fluently enough. But when Holden said this was his fourth school change, the teacher couldn't continue the conversation. Clearly, Holden was troubled by this too, but didn't know who to complain to. Then the teacher found Holden's history exam and started reading what Holden had written on it. Holden had written, "You can fail me if you want. Anyway, except for English, I couldn't pass any subject." When writing this, Holden was caught between childish and adult roles. Subconsciously, he hoped this childishness would relieve his guilt over failing. But now, facing a wise adult like his history teacher, Holden was forced to confront those words again. Holden felt ashamed and annoyed. The teacher said more about Holden's past expulsions and his concern, but Holden heard none of it. He even pitied the teacher, recognizing he wanted to help. He's been kicked out of several schools, always for bad grades or causing trouble. This time, he ended up at a prestigious prep school called Pensy Prep, but he still couldn't settle down there. He failed 4 out of 5 final exams, so the headmaster told him, "Don't come back after Christmas break." There were still a few days left before Christmas break, but Holden couldn't stand it anymore. He felt bored everywhere and thought everyone was phony. So he decided to leave early, wander around New York City for a couple of days before heading home. Yeah, just like you'd think, Holden is a pretty rebellious kid, smoke always in hand, curse words flying, but sometimes he unwittingly shows a bit of confusion and vulnerability. There's a part in the book where Holden reflects on his age, and it's really interesting. He jokes about having gray hair already, then says he's 17, 6 foot 2.5 inches, about 189, so he looks like an adult. But sometimes he acts really immature, like he's only 12. 12 to 18 is a tricky stage. In personality psychology, this period is called the psychosocial moratorium. What is a psychosocial moratorium? Technically, once you're past 12, you're not a child anymore. You should ditch the kid rules and adopt adult ways and social logic. But changing overnight isn't possible. It takes a process. Um, During this process, teenagers face an identity crisis. What does that mean? It means that adjusting your values and social roles to align with adult society's rules is pretty tough. Those who adjust well transition smoothly into adulthood. Those who don't might always feel out of sync with society, unable to fit in well, and could end up living a life of cynicism and isolation. Holden, the novel's protagonist, is going through this. He refuses to change himself because he despises the hypocrisy of adult society and believes only the world of children is pure and good. So, what he fears most is that as kids grow up, they become just as phony as adults. That's why in Holden's world, childhood friends, his dead brother, and his little sister, who hasn't grown up yet, are the most beautiful and cherished things. He suggested Holden see a psychiatrist to help him understand himself. That conversation was clearly a waste of effort. Holden intended to find someone who could enlighten him, but old Luce clearly wasn't the right choice. She was clever and witty, but only showed off his knowledge, unwilling to listen or take responsibility for giving advice. By now, it was the second night, and Holden thought of someone else he might turn to for help. When Holden called his English teacher, the teacher and his wife were already asleep, but still warmly welcomed him, offering him cigarettes and making coffee. The English teacher wasn't old, spoke wittily, always cared for students, and admired Holden's English skills. She understood Holden's confusion and helplessness, advising him to continue his studies, to absorb the wisdom of predecessors, and better understand himself. Although Holden didn't comment on this advice, he repeated it word for word, showing he took it to heart. Later, when Phoebe wanted to skip school and run away with him, he firmly refused, showing he'd accepted the English teacher's guidance. But at the time, he didn't want to admit it, just saying he was tired and wanted to sleep. However, that night, a sudden incident threw Holden back into the abyss. As he slept groggily, someone suddenly touched his head. Opening his eyes, it was the English teacher. Holden was terrified. Suspecting he was gay, he jumped up, made an excuse, and fled. Was the English teacher gay? Holden couldn't be sure. After calming down, he thought he might have overreacted. But after this, Holden could no longer fully trust the English teacher. The lifeline he'd finally grasped was now useless. Holden sought help from the outside world, but kept hitting walls. So he decided to hitchhike west, become a deaf mute, and live in isolation. He wrote a note to his sister Phoebe, meeting her at the museum entrance at noon for a final goodbye. Museums and children were the most beautiful things in his heart. When facing the adult world, Holden always rebelled against its filth and hypocrisy, but toward children, he had a protective instinct. In the novel, there's a detail where, at Phoebe's school, Holden sees graffiti on the wall. He gets angry, afraid it'll corrupt the kids, and wants to wipe it off. But he's scared that if he wipes it off, a teacher might catch him and think he wrote it. After wrestling with it, he still wipes it off. He'd rather risk being misunderstood to protect the kid's innocence. Phoebe's only in fourth grade, still years away from the adult world. But Holden still frets over her. He once told Phoebe, "I keep imagining a bunch of kids playing in a huge rye field, thousands of them, no one around, no adults. Except for me, I'm standing by that crazy cliff, and my job's to catch any kid who runs toward it. The kids are all running wild, not knowing where they're headed. I gotta come out and catch 'em. That's all I do all day. I just want to be the catcher in the rye." This passage is the heart of the novel. The kids playing freely in the rye field symbolize childhood innocence. Holden's idea is that if he can be a protector, he'll do everything to preserve that beauty. The adult world is the cliff, dangerous and hypocritical. Once you fall in and get tainted by its hypocrisy, innocence is lost forever. But we know rye is usually grown on plains. In real life, there's no cliff with rye by it. This absurd combo hints that the divide Holden imagines between adult and kid worlds doesn't really exist. Adults can be sincere and kind too, like the nuns Holden met at the station. He admitted they were kind and pleasant to talk to. Holden offered to donate money, and the nuns kept asking, "Are you sure it's okay? Will you have enough money left?" Holden's English teacher once picked up an injured student without hesitation, blood staining his own clothes. This shows the adult world isn't all a terrifying abyss. And kids aren't all innocent. Phoebe had scratches on her arm from other kids getting revenge. Holden met two kids at the museum entrance, immediately saw they were skipping school, and they lied saying they didn't have class today. The things Holden hates have always existed in the children's world. He just chooses to ignore them. So when Holden described the vision of the catcher in the rye, saying it came from a poem by Robert Burns, Phoebe kept correcting him that he misattributed it. The original poem isn't written like that at all and doesn't mean that. Holden's desires are just his own wishful thinking. In the end, Holden didn't go west nor become a deaf mute living in isolation. His sister Phoebe came, as promised, dragging a small suitcase, saying she wanted to go with Holden. Holden naturally refused, but couldn't persuade Phoebe, so he had to give up. So he decided to promise Phoebe he'd go home. But Phoebe was still angry at the time. So Holden took her to the zoo and treated her to a ride on the carousel. Holden watched from the side, a bit worried Phoebe might fall off. But in the end, he said nothing and did nothing, because he realized this truth. With kids, if they want to reach for something dangerous, you have to let them do it. Best not to say anything. If they fall, let them fall. Don't say anything to stop them. Because for kids to mature and grow up, they must face many trials. But as they were solving difficulties on their own, a heavy rain poured down. Everyone ran for cover, but Holden stood still, soaked through, yet feeling extremely happy inside. This scene has strong symbolic meaning. The heavy rain was a spiritual baptism. Holden finally understood that innocence will always be lost, and people must grow up. At the story's end, Holden realizes he can't be the catcher. Instead, his sister pulled Holden back from the cliff. This role reversal suggests the novel deconstructs traditional coming-of-age narratives. At the novel's beginning, Holden mentions the novel David Copperfield by the famous British novelist Charles Dickens, which tells the story of an orphan growing into a useful member of society, a typical traditional coming-of-age novel. In form, The Catcher in the Rye also depicts an adolescent journey where the protagonist faces hardships and ultimately gains insights about growth. These features appear no different from traditional coming-of-age novels. But right from the start, Holden bluntly states, "The story I'm telling isn't like that David Copperfield crap. That stuff bores you to death. In traditional coming of age novels, protagonists yearn for growth, overcoming obstacles to shed childishness and gain adult acceptance, actively resolving identity crises. But The Catcher in the Rye is different. Holden resists growth, fears change, cares nothing for gaining experience, only worries about losing innocence. Attitude-wise, he has poor grades and lacks effort. Ideas of academic triumph and social advancement don't apply to him at all. Not only that, he constantly swears, fights in dorms, and shows zero respect for school rules. Later in New York, he mimics adults by smoking, visiting bars, even hiring a prostitute. Traditionally, he'd be seen as an unmotivated rebel, exactly why the novel faced frequent bans. Unlike traditional novels praising ambition, it shows deepest sympathy for a rebellious youth's struggles and disillusionment. This deconstruction of traditional growth narratives is embodied in Holden himself. And Holden mentally constructs oppositions, adults as hypocritical or corrupt versus children as innocent or pure. Superficially, he champions the children's side, absolute innocence and purity. Yet his experiences and actions undermine this dichotomy. Toward adult intimacy, he scoffs yet secretly yearns. In a New York hotel, through a window, he watches a couple spraying water at each other in a bathroom, acting like it's the world's greatest fun. He first scoffs, calling them perverted and sick, but after watching, changes his mind, finding such perverted stuff strangely alluring. He also said, sometimes he feels like a sex maniac because he starts thinking how great it would be to find a girl to splash water on each other's faces and stuff. Playful, though a bit crude, his thinking follows that childish black and white logic. He believes if children are good, then adults must be bad. If lying is bad, then all phoniness is unforgivable. Yet his own actions blur those boundaries. He admits you probably never saw a worse liar than me in your whole life. God, it's awful. Like, if I'm going to the store to buy a magazine and somebody asks me where I'm going, I might say I'm going to the opera to cherish his friends in memory, but scorns them in real life. This portrayal of adolescent psychological conflict is incredibly precise and powerful. Its impact transcends time and borders. Chinese writer Mai Jia said of Holden, he's both a daring hero who speaks, acts, hates, and fights, yet also just a lonely, repressed youth full of anger and bitterness. Inspired by this characterization and admiration for Salinger, Zhang Benhu changed his pen name to Mai Jia. This novel motivated him to start writing. In 2008, he won the Mal Dun Literature Prize for his novel In the Dark. Writer Su Tong also noted, the seemingly casual depiction of adolescent psychology in Catcher feels so real, you hear characters breathing. Its precision deeply moved me. So why did Salinger create this anti-coming-of-age novel with such a character? This leads us to the social context of that era. In 1942, when the U.S. entered 2.2, Salinger enlisted and worked in counterintelligence. He'd already started writing parts of Holden's story, but was psychologically unprepared for war. So he fought in the Normandy invasion. That day, nearly two-thirds of his comrades died in battle. Though Salinger survived, he could never forget the battlefield smell of burning flesh like charred chicken. After the war, he was twice hospitalized for mental illness, but never escaped his PTSD. More shattered the beliefs of many, including Salinger himself. Before World War II, people believed humans were rational beings. Both technology and social systems could gradually improve through wisdom and reason, promising a bright future. Yet war's brutality revealed rationality was just a beautiful illusion. An ordinary, kind person could commit atrocities like massacre on the battlefield. Opposing sides even developed biochemical weapons, violating humanity as fellow humans slaughtered each other. People lost faith in reason and democracy. Pessimism gradually became mainstream in American society. Throughout the 1950s, America's cultural atmosphere turned cold and negative. WTY also destroyed belief in the American dream. At war's end, America dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan, shocking Americans who saw their government as unethical and the nation tainted. Post war, America's economy boomed unprecedentedly, profoundly altering lifestyles and values. People abandoned the American dream's ideals, diligence, courage, ambition, replacing them with sole pursuit of money, creating a negative, materialistic society. This was the social climate when Salinger wrote post war and also Holden's growing environment in the novel. Holden's father was a famous lawyer, but cared only about money, lacking professional ethics. His writer brother was brilliant, but sold his creativity cheaply for money, pandering to market vulgarity. The school principal was extremely snobbish, fawning over wealthy parents while sneering at shabbily dressed ones. Against this backdrop, 1950s America birthed youth dubbed the Beat Generation. They indulged in drugs and sex, scorned rules, and ignored social issues. Holden epitomizes the Beat Generation. He despises school education, calling everyone phonies, focused only on studying to succeed and buy a goddamn Cadillac. When the football team lost, you still had to pretend to care. Guys spent all day talking about women, booze, and sex. His catchphrase, phony, sums up his view of the hypocritical, exaggerated adult world. But the Beat Generation isn't entirely negative. The term Beat Generation also implies breaking rules. They weren't blindly indulging in materialism, but struggling with purpose. This manifests in Holden as his refusal to grow up or accept adult rules. He saw hypocrisy and utilitarianism in adults, his father, brother, and school headmaster. So when he felt himself on the cliff's edge, he vowed to protect kids from falling into the corrupt adult world. Meanwhile, he built walls of rebellion, masking confusion and fragility with indifference. Salinger lived through these 211 era changes. Through Holden, he mirrored post-war youth's struggles, resonating with a generation. Though in the novel, Holden returns home with Phoebe, planning to continue school. Outside the book, Salinger lived the ideal after fame, buying land, building a secluded cabin. He withdrew completely from society. Many wondered why he never responded to criticism or praise. But in Catcher, Salinger revealed the novel's value through the English teacher's words. That passage was spoken to Holden. Many throughout history wandered morally and spiritually like you do now. Fortunately, some recorded their journeys. You can learn from them. If you contribute something someday, others may learn from you too. A marvelous cycle, isn't it? This isn't education, it's history, it's poetry. All right, that's our interpretation of The Catcher in the Rye. Keynotes below. See you tomorrow.